In this video we'll talk about some specific examples of how to factor these kinds of trinomials. And I think it's my opinion that this is probably going to be the video that makes the most sense because it's the most clear. It's the most concrete, I should say. Because before we were talking about primarily just symbols, and now we're going to actually be using some numbers. So let's talk about some examples. I think this is where you're going to see the most sense from this. So let's factor x squared minus x minus 20. Okay, so for this, I'm going to do this using my mouse first. So I can take a look at this. First of all, I know it's going to be, just because I recognize that this is that type of trinomial, I know it's going to be two different factors like this. And so I'll take a look at this last one here. This is a minus in front of the 20, in front of the last term. So I know that one term is going to be plus, and the other one's going to be minus. I don't know what these two parts are going to be yet, but I do know that one of these is going to be a plus and one of these is going to be a minus. So I need to find two numbers that when you multiply them together make 20, and when you make negative 20, excuse me, and when you add them together make negative 1, because you have a minus x here, so this is an understood 1. Minus 1 times x. So let's pick two random numbers. Now, generally speaking, you can probably do this in your head pretty easily once you get the hang of it, but for now, we'll go ahead and do this part openly. So we'll have 2 times 10. That makes 20, right? Okay, what happens when you add 2 and 10? Well, we know that the minus has to go with the larger number, because that was the last example, but the last type of problem from the previous video. So that means we're going to be doing 2 minus 10, and that's going to give us minus 8. But this isn't minus 8 here, so 2 and 10 won't work. So let's try something else that'll multiply to make 20. 4 and 5. So 4 and 5 multiply together to make 20, and so then we put the minus with the larger number because we have a minus here. So we have 4 minus 5 equals negative 1, which is what we have here. So that means that 4 and 5 are the right numbers. And like I said, the 5 goes with the minus. So we have 5, 4. So let's go ahead and do this on a new line. So we have x squared minus x minus 20 equals x plus 4 times x minus 5. Okay, so let's clear off some of this stuff. And we can check this. Let's go ahead and clear all of it off. And we can check this by multiplying this out, by doing FOIL, or I like to think of it visually personally. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to do this down here. So if we have x plus 4 times x minus 5, okay, well that's going to be, you have x times x will make this x squared, x times negative 5 will make this minus 5, 4 times x gives you plus 4x, 4 and negative 5 gives you minus 20. Combine like terms, we'll get x squared minus x minus 20. And that equals the problem we were originally given. So that means we've checked it. It works. Okay, so that means that x plus 4 times x minus 5 is the final answer. Okay, so that gives us an example of how to factor of the last form, were the last form from the previous video. It doesn't really matter what it's not really numbered specifically. I'm just calling it that. So when you have a minus and a minus, you're going to have, if you have a minus here, you're going to have a plus for one. Let's just generically speaking, let's say we don't know what the answer is yet. Oops. We just know that there's going to be a plus for one number and a minus for another. And the minus here tells us that the minus is going to go with the larger number. And that's the result that we got. Okay, so let's go to a new example. Factor x squared minus 2x plus 1. Okay, so x squared minus 2x plus 1. So this plus at the end here tells us something very important. That means that the signs are going to be the same. They're either both going to be plus or they're both going to be minus. They're still going to have an x and x on the left side for both, of course. So they're either both plus or both minus. This minus here tells us what those two things are. They're both minus. X minus something and x minus something. We don't know what that something is yet. So what two things, when you multiply them together, equal 1? Well, there's only one thing that when you multiply by that, I mean, we're talking about integers, so it has to be 1 and 1. So let's go ahead and try that out. 1 times 1 will give you 1, and negative 1, so just, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it's good to go ahead and do it the longer way, just so we can see it. Oh, sorry, negative 1 and negative 1, I should say. So when you multiply negative 1 by negative 1, you get positive 1. When you add negative 1 and negative 1, you get negative 2. That's what this middle term is, negative 2. So that means that x minus 1 times x minus 1 should be the final answer. So let's go ahead and write that out. So if we have x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals x minus 1 times x minus 1. Okay, let's go ahead and clear all that stuff off. So we can check this answer once again by multiplying, by distributing. So if we have x minus 1 times x minus 1, so we have x times x will give us x squared. X times negative 1 will give us negative x. Negative 1 times x will give us negative x. And negative 1 times negative 1, negative and negative make a positive, so plus 1. Combine these two like terms, x squared minus 2x plus 1. So that is the problem that we were originally given, so that means that we did it right, or at least we most likely got it right. It's also remotely possible that you can do the problem wrong and do the distribution wrong, but hopefully that won't happen. So that means that x minus 1 times x minus 1 is our final answer. Okay, we have two more examples to do. We want to factor x squared plus 2x minus 35. Yes, I don't know why I didn't scroll down before. So factor x squared plus 2x minus 35. So we see this negative here. Remember that again tells us something pretty important. That means it's going to be x plus, let's do this down here. This is a little too high because it's going to conflict. That means we're going to have x plus something and x minus something. Because the only way that we could have a negative here is that there's a positive number and a negative number that are being multiplied together. So what things that we multiply them together make 35? Well, 35 has two prime numbers, 7 and 5, so let's start with those. And we know that since this is positive, so let's go ahead and write this down, 7 and 5. Since this is positive, the positive will go with a larger number, so the negative will go with 5 since it's smaller. So let's add 7 and negative 5. We'll give you 2. So that means it's right, because when you add them together, you get the middle term. So plus 7 minus 5. So let's go ahead and write that out. X squared minus 2x minus 35 equals x plus 7 times x minus 5. And that's going to be our final answer, but before we commit to that, let's go ahead and check it. So we have x plus 7 times x minus 5. X times x makes x squared. X minus 5, x minus 5x. X times minus 5, I should say. 7 times x gives us plus 7x. 7 times negative 5 will give us negative 35. Combine like terms, we'll get x squared plus 2x minus 35. Which was the problem that we were originally given. So that means that we most likely got it right. Now let's do one last example. We want to factor x squared plus 9x plus 20. Okay, so let's scroll down a little bit. So x squared plus 9x plus 20. Okay, so we want to this plus tells us that they're either both going to be positive or they're both going to be negative. And this plus in the middle tells us that they're both going to be positive. So just to reiterate, if this sign here is positive, then they're both going to be the same. Then, if we know they're both going to be the same, if this term is plus, then they're both going to be plus. If this term is minus, then they're both going to be minus. Okay, so what two terms, when you multiply them together, make 20? Well, let's try 4 and 5. So 4 and 5, when you add them together, are going to make, when you multiply them together, it's going to make 20. When you add them, it's going to make 9. Hopefully you're jumping ahead of me already, because this should be, this one is a pretty obvious one, or at least it should be. So x plus 4 times x plus 5. So let's go ahead and put that on the next line. X squared plus 9x plus 20 equals x plus 4 times x plus 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear that off. And finally, once more, let's go ahead and check it. So if we have x plus 4 times x plus 5 is equal to x squared plus 5x plus 4x plus 20. And we can simplify that further to x squared plus 9x plus 20. And that is the same thing as the original problem. So that means this is going to be our final answer. Alright, that concludes section 6.3. I will see you in 6.4.